Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's Theodore, yeah? Theodore? Jens? Thank you.
It's like school.
It's like school, of course. I'm a professor. I'm supposed to do these things. Yeah? Nobody's speaking in my class. I speak in my class. Welcome to Bournemouth University Tourism Forum in World Travel Market. This is our annual event. We come along to the World Travel Market to close effectively the World Travel Market with some of the most interesting things that we learned over the last few days. The format that we have is quite simple, and I'll explain that in a minute. I'd like, first of all, to ask my Bournemouth University colleagues to stand up so you can see who they are. My dean is right at the back, Keith Wilkes. Contrary to what people say, this event is not exactly free, so Keith is collecting money at the end. No, that was a bad joke. So my dean, Dr. Keith Wilkes, my deputy dean, Alan Fayel. We've got, who else have we got here? We've got Adele, Professor Adele Latkin, who is going to be speaking in a minute. Richard Chipway, who is around, I saw him a minute ago. Here he is. Yeah. So engage with us. We're here to engage with industry. We're here to engage with potential students. We're here to discuss with you the major issues. We, for the first time ever, we have a stand in the World Travel Market. We are the only university who has a stand in the World Travel Market. We're very proud of it, and we make a big fuss. Hopefully next year we'll have a bigger one. I'm very pleased that many of you passed by, and we discussed several things on how to collaborate. I just saw Lorraine there as well, so as I'm seeing people around. The format of this thing, fantastic, Marcio's here, hello. Thank you. The format of this thing is we normally have 3 influential presentations from the beginning. Marcio has just arrived, Marcio Favilla from the World Tourism Organization, the General Director. Then we'll have my colleague Adele Latkin, and then my colleague Richard Sipwe, and then we are going to go to our panel. We are very privileged to have a very distinguished panel with my good friend John Kent from U-Travel and Aquis Hotels and Resorts. Yesterday we spent a fantastic day with John, and we had a graduation in Bournemouth University. We had 769 graduates, and John was the 770. He got an honorary degree, an honorary doctorate from Bournemouth University for his services to the tourism industry. Then we've got my good friend Jens from Dragon Trail in China. Jens is one of the most influential people on social media around the planet, having worked in Germany, in Canada, in China, and God knows where. We meet all over the place. After that, we've got Gerald Brown from UBN Aviation and Routes UK, who will talk about airline issues. And then our good friend Dermond Blastland, ex-TUI, and now he's doing several other very interesting things, and he'll talk about tour operating and where tourism is going in the world. I'm very pleased that we are fully booked. I always like to have an overbooking. I don't like underbookings, and I've asked if we can have some more chairs, but we'll try our best. So I know that several people have got to catch flights. I'm very grateful to Marcio for changing his flights to be with us today and then flying straight out. And without further delay, I'll hopefully manage to upload his presentation, and I'll ask him to come along and take the floor. Let me see if I can do that. Aha! A few presentations here. Which one do you like?
Just a minute, let me see which one.
Do you like the Korean one? I think I've seen this. I was in Korea with you recently.
No. The one that's WTM up there. Yeah.
This one, yeah?
No. Up more. Yeah, one down. Up.
Why don't we do it together? I met Marcio when he was Deputy Minister of Tourism in Brazil in 2005. Five? Yeah. And since then, yeah, just drop it.
No, one above.
Oh, one above. Okay, that's fine.
That's it,
and since then, we collaborate because we are very active on the WTO as well. Marcio is going to talk about the new research that they've recently done, which is about tourism in 2030. and he'll show you what the WTO. Perfect. Technology works. Alan didn't believe that. Anytime I said technology.
Well, many times we are taken not to believe it. Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Bouhalis. Good morning or good afternoon, you all. Forgive me for coming into the room in such a way. But the important thing is that can't hear. Okay. Now. Okay. So I have the pleasure here to bring to you for this discussion a summary of our latest research that we have been conducting for almost 2 years now, which we call Tourism Towards 2030. It's the global overview. It's a global overview. It's basically quantitative results. We do not have in the publication we have just issued 3 weeks ago in our General Assembly in Korea the qualitative analysis that is behind all this. So I want to show you basically the qualitative results. Now the next steps that we will take will be to issue a longer analysis with the qualitative results, and then the regional analysis in other publications along next year. This is a continuation of what we did 10 years ago with what was called Tourism 2020 Vision. And here we start by showing with the blue line what 10 years ago was anticipated as the projections on international tourist arrivals and what actually happened. According to that study, 10 years ago, we would reach 1 billion international arrivals in 2010. That actually is going to take place next year, 2012, because of the crisis, the economic crisis that we had in 2008 and 2009. Now, two things I would like to mention at this point. We do not have projections for individual countries, contrary to what was in the 2020 study. We have for the regions of the world, the 5 regions, as we call them at UNWTO, the Americas, Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Asia and the Pacific, and for 17 sub-regions. Okay, so we have these projections according to these 17 sub-regions and regions. Now, we have, based on international tourist arrivals, because that's the longest series that we have since 1950, and for sure we are not playing down the importance of domestic tourism. To the contrary, we think that domestic tourism in economic terms is extremely relevant. Just to give you an idea, for the G20 countries, in all of them, domestic tourism has a more economic impact than international tourism. Okay, but the international tourism arrivals is a very interesting also way of following up the developments of tourism, and we have based on this series. Now, also what I would like, I think it's relevant to mention here, is the fact that we have considered as important variables in the definition of our forecast the evolution of gross domestic product and cost of transport. But in the sensitivity analysis that we have carried out, and also based on what we saw in the last 10 years, GDP is much more important, has a bigger impact than cost of transport. So this is what we have seen in the last 30 years and what we project for the next 20 years. In the last 30 years, we had an average of 4.2% per year of growth of international arrivals. Now we project a 3.3% for the next 20 years. 3.5 in the first, in the coming 10 years, and 2.9% in the following 10 years, from 2020 to 2030. Even though we have, just a minute please, let me come back here. You see that there is, year after year, there is a big variation because of economic cycles, etc. The last 10 years were the most volatile ones that we see in this series since 1950. Is still tourism, international arrivals grew at very, very high volumes and rates. Now, for the next 20 years, what we expect to happen is to have, in average, 43 million additional international arrivals per year. It's an enormous volume. So even though we decrease in terms of percentage, in average from 4.2 to 3.3, we still will have a growth from 28 million international arrivals in average to 43 million international arrivals. So what does it mean overall? It's like bringing a new Italy every year into the market. And Italy receives exactly 43 million international arrivals every year, and it's the fifth most important tourism destination considering this indicator. So it's more moderate, but the volumes will continue to increase, and we can think of all the repercussions that it will have. So therefore, coming from 940 million international arrivals last year, and even if we go back in history, 25 million in 1950, about 480 million in 2010, and 940 million last year, 1 billion international tourists next year. We project 1.4 billion for 2020 and 1.8 billion international tourists in 20 years' time. So very few sectors in the world economy have such a long-term performance if we look back 60 years, and the prospect of continuous growth as we see in tourism. Again, domestic tourism is very, very important. The volumes are much greater, but if we see only international tourism arrivals, the figures are fantastic. So this is in repetition now. This is a very interesting trend that we have seen from the past. 30 years ago, advanced economies received 70% of international arrivals. Last year, that figure was 53%. Now we expect the two lines crossing, arrivals in emerging economy and other developing destinations and advanced destinations in 2015, 50%. In 2030, we expect that the emerging economies will receive 57% of international arrivals, and advanced economies 53%. But still, advanced economies will continue to have larger numbers of international arrivals as compared to today. Just the percentage will change. Asian Pacific will gain most of the new arrivals. We will see that in the yellow line. It has already become the second most important region in terms of destination. Europe, which last year received about 52% of international arrivals, will receive about 41% in 20 years' time. and Asia Pacific, that is last year received around 22%. We expect to receive 31% in 20 years' time. Americas, the Americas, North, Central, South, and Caribbean, are losing relative share, even though South America is growing, and we expect to continue to grow in terms of relative share. The Middle East and Africa have been growing very remarkably, even though they started and they're still low in relative terms as compared to other regions. But it's important to remember that throughout the crisis, only Africa showed positive results in 2008 and 2009, besides 2010, continuing that. So, as I said, for Asian Pacific, the Middle East and Africa to increase their relative shares, we see that, let me give you another figure here. Americas, that last year received 16% of all international arrivals. In 30 years' time, we expect to receive 14%. Now, in terms of sub-regions, Northeast Asia will be the most visited sub-region in 20 years' time. Northeast Asia is China, Japan, Korea, Mongolia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau. The second one is going to be the Southern Mediterranean Europe, which is the first one, which was the first one last year. Last year, Southern Mediterranean Europe received 169 million international arrivals. We expect that in 10 years' time to receive 100 million more. So it will still grow, but we'll lose the first place as a destination of international arrivals. This is another very interesting figure here. Europe continues to lead in terms of arrivals received per 100 of population. So, and that also applies to the three of European sub-regions, the Western Europe, that per population receives the biggest number of international tourists, 81 per 100 last year, 114 we expect for 2030. Now, one analysis that we can make out of it is that even though we will receive 1.8 billion in 20 years' time, we see that there are many parts of the world that in terms of population per 100 population will still receive much less than Europe receives today. So the load in terms of arrivals in other parts of the world in 20 years' time will be still less than it is today in Western Europe, in other parts of Europe. In terms of purpose of visit, no major change. That is a very stable share along history. Leisure, recreation, holidays will remain the most important, with around 51%. Visiting friends and relatives, about 30%, and business and professional travelers, around 19%. Now, in terms of mode of transport, air transport will continue to increase its market share, but by very, very little. We had that inversion of the curve. Air transport became predominant in 2006. Today it responds for about 52% of international arrivals as compared to other surface modes of transport, car, trains, buses, ships. And we expect that to change by just 1 percentage point. Over 20 years' time, it's nothing. Here we may have, to my view, we may have an increase by air a long time, considering the fact that we believe still in Africa and parts of the Americas and Asia, there is a lot of room to grow in terms of productivity in the air sector. This is a very stable, also a very stable indicator. Most people travel within their same region. So practically no change, just 1 percentage point change. So 80% of international arrivals are from people coming from the same region. And I refer to region here of the 5 regions I mentioned before. Now, between regions, therefore, respond to 20% of international arrivals. In terms of outbound growth, Asia and Pacific, we expect for the next 20 years to grow at 5.5% per year in average, whereas Europe by 2.5%. So even though Europe will grow in terms of outbound less than half than Asia Pacific, it will still be the most important outbound region. The same regarding arrivals or arrivals generated per 100 population. That means people coming out of their region to other countries, whether from the same region or other regions. So per 100 of population, last year Europe generated 57 international arrivals. In 20 years' time, 89. Again, here we see how much room there is to grow, because in long term, Asia and the Pacific, Americas, parts of, and also Africa, they have very, very low indicators, very low indicators in this aspect here. Relatively very few people travel out of these regions internationally. Middle East also. So we have some assumptions there. We ran a sensitivity analysis. If the cost of traveling rises faster, we will have 1.6 billion international arrivals. If we have transport costs continuing to fall, we will reach about 2 billion international arrivals. Because one of the premises we took here is that we are coming from a long period of decreasing costs of transport, and we start a period of growing cost of transport. So in summary, we come from a 4.2% per year to 3.3% per year of growth in international arrivals. The base volumes are higher. This is also a result of lower GDP growth. As economies grow more, they mature. There is a trend of lower GDP growth. Therefore, and also a lower elasticity of travel to GDP, and as I mentioned, the issue of the cost of transport. Now, as a long-term pattern, we see more moderate growth, sustainable, and inclusive. Inclusive in the sense that we will see many more destinations in the market becoming more relevant. People from more people from countries, from other countries, coming into the market. So, in that sense, inclusive, and we think that we will have more beneficiaries also of tourism as a whole, not only international but domestic. So, in that sense, also inclusive. This as a final or the one before final slide, we have here we see lots of opportunities and challenges to make these figures possible, and I will not go into these aspects so that we have more time here to discuss. And if you want to find these and other information in our website, here is how to connect. We have an electronic library. We have hard copies of publications, and they are available. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for staying there for a minute. Thank you very much, Marcio. I know that Marcio has got to catch a flight, so if anybody would like to ask questions, I'll allow 2 or 3 questions, because I know that some people were kind of interested in ask questions. Have you got any questions for Marcio?
Maybe let me suggest I stay a bit more, and then if people think of questions.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, in which case then we're going to the next presentation by my colleague, Professor Adel Latkin. And Adel is an expert in a lot of things. What? She said something rude to my ear. No. He's an expert on human resources and tourism, and she's going to tell us the major trends.
Thank you very much, Demetrius. Good afternoon, everybody. Demetrius asked me a while ago if I would do a short presentation on really sort of the future of human resources in tourism. And I was delighted to accept, because I said, well, a presentation about the future, of course, it's going to be at least 5 years before you know whether I was telling you the truth or not. So we can't predict the future, but what I have done is think about some of the big issues relating to those people that work in our industry, and try to summarise some of those key areas. And in this context, I'm talking about human resources as a mechanism used to describe the individuals that make up the workforce. So I'm not talking about HR management strategies. I'm talking about human resources in terms of the people that do the jobs in our industry. So it's a big picture approach. One of the things I'm conscious of in trying to provide a summary on a big scale is because a lot of the individual detail gets left behind. But this is about the big trends, and it's about thinking about those people that work in the industry. So what I would encourage you to do in the next 10 minutes or so is think about those people whose livelihoods depend on our industry, those people who do the jobs that serve us. We've all experienced tourism, we know a lot about travel, but think about those individual encounters that make the difference to you as a traveller. How good it is when someone makes you feel welcome, when somebody does that job well. How important is it to our industry that we have good ambassadors that set good examples and make this experience of tourism a good one. So I encourage you to think about the people in our industry. I don't think I need to spend any time talking about tourism employment. The figures behind me speak for themselves. And we've just heard about growth of tourism, predicted 4% growth rates. Of course, what will correspond to that is increasing numbers of people working in the industry. So actually employment figures in the industry are notoriously difficult to estimate, and you hear various sides of the story. But currently around 235 million people working in tourism according to the ILO. In the UK, 2.1 million people. So it's big business. Trends. I've actually got 10 trends to share with you this afternoon. The first one is, I think, really we're looking at increased demand for workers in our sector. And I think ultimately that's a very positive note to start with. There are very few areas right now where we can talk positively about growth. And certainly in terms of employment in our industry, the overall picture for the longer term trends is looking pretty good. Now that's little comfort if right now you're working for an organisation where things are very tight, maybe you're looking at decrease in business, maybe you're working for somebody where the risk of redundancy is quite high. So of course that's not the case everywhere. But the big picture is, with the growth in tourism around 4%, we are looking ultimately at more jobs. So actually, it's positive. Secondly, I think there's a greater awareness of the value of human resources in our industry. I think there are very few people now would argue that it's the people that actually make up our product and our services. Really, any organisation is only as good as the people that work for it. And we can have good infrastructure, we can have good IT, we can have lots of things that work well, but without the people there expertly doing the jobs, what is it that differentiates your product or your service from any others? So I think employers are more and more realising this. And that's reflected in perhaps better career routes, perhaps some of those jobs that used to be hard to fill, perhaps making better efforts to attract and retain people in those sections. And we hear a lot now about employee engagement, how to actually make people that work in the industry feel like they're a part of it and work towards profit-making schemes. And employee engagement can come in many different ways, something as simple as flexible working hours or profit sharing, or perhaps some way of making somebody's job more interesting. But I think it's firmly about recognising that people are key, they are absolutely instrumental in making your business a good or a bad one, therefore we need to work towards how to make it an attractive career option. Number 3, continued labour mobility and transient workers in our industry. If you think about the increased demand for jobs and employment opportunities, it follows quite naturally that there is a fair degree of mobility within our industry. And I'm talking about international mobility, opportunities for people to cross countries and work in different environments, but also mobility into our sector from perhaps other industries. So transient economies where things are changing, how does that affect mobility? I think it will increase. We hear a lot about transient workers, usually negative, but ultimately perhaps actually that suits the business well. There will always be a room for part-time people and people who move on after maybe 3 or 4 months. Because the challenge for industry is how to engage those people who are often at the front line of service, and of course how to effectively train people in a cost-effective way. But I think continued mobility is a likely feature for the future. Now the 4th one, I've said really a continued need for education and training. Well, I would say that because I work in education, so of course improved need for education and training. I think there's room for lots of providers. Obviously we represent the university sector, but we work in combination with other people that offer good training programs for people that are interested in working in this sector. So we've got technical colleges, of course industry training, different types of training, certainly room for many, many different providers. Addressing the skills gap is likely to increase, I think. We hear a lot about skills that are missing from our workforce. And part of that is because it's an easy access sector to get into. Often there's a mismatch between what industry needs and the people who are out there. We hear that people are lacking management skills, so how can we try and address some of these issues? How can we ensure that we are teaching people appropriate soft skills? Perhaps things like creativity and entrepreneurship will increasingly become significant in the years ahead. I think certainly IT skills will dominate, and I think how we think about, thank you, I think we can't ignore that. And often people say to us, how do we keep current with the tremendous developments in IT? Training, of course, doesn't happen now in one place at one person's point in life. It can take place anywhere, so a lifelong learning approach. And of course, employers' role in the training process. And evidence suggests that a properly trained employer is someone who's likely to stick around longer, so that's another way of engaging people. So I think there will be a need for continued education, certainly. Given the mobility, I think point number 5 is we will see an increasingly diverse workforce. If we are struggling to find people to work in the sector, then it stands to reason that we'll look at various different opportunities and possibilities for gaining people to work in the industry. So there will be more diversity, perhaps based on age, gender, ethnicity, and certainly educational level. Now, if you think about the implications for that, is that a good or a bad thing? I think most people would see it as very positive, but it does require specific training needs and perhaps different cultural understandings and a recognition that we are not all the same, and things need to perhaps be tailored a little bit more specifically. So diversity within the workforce, much like diversity within our tourist population, I think is a trend that will continue. Possibly, we're looking at a gender-biased workforce. Figures from the mid-1980s suggested that 1/3 of people working in tourism were female. And now that estimate's risen to 46% generally, but quite staggeringly high percentage of females in certain sectors, catering and accommodation being one of them. Now, of course, that's true of many industries. You might have some kind of gender bias. But evidence suggests that many females in the industry are not making it to the more management positions. It's interesting for me as an educator, because I think one of the things we see in our programmes is, again, a very heavily female-based gender bias. And we had our School of Tourism graduation ceremony yesterday, and actually the boys walking across the stage are fairly hard to find. It's almost 90% females. So a lot of interest in females, but perhaps they don't make it towards the more senior positions. Now, lots of reasons for that, but it may be a lost opportunity. And I think that's something that perhaps we need to think about for future issues, and certainly lots of work has been doing in that area. And of course, how to ensure that all genders and all ages and all people are fairly represented. We hear a lot about Generation Y as employers, and again following this idea that we'll need more people to work. What is it specifically about this new generation of people that may affect our industry? We are a young industry. Figures are that in the UK, 44% of people working in tourism are below the age of 30. So it is a young workforce. There's quite a lot of research that says that young people need to be managed differently now. And if you think about those people who are in management positions, they are usually maybe 10, 15, 20 years older. Now, if we've got to attract people to our industry, which in some areas has a bit of a poor image, and if we're going to encourage people to stay, then perhaps we need to think about how we manage that younger workforce. Interestingly, of course, as well, as retirement ages are rising, we might have quite significant gaps in terms of lots of young people in the industry, but also older people as well. So that may be something that we need to think about in terms of managing our human resources. Number 8 is social media. And when I was thinking about this, I realised that actually this is a fairly unknown area. We know very little about the role of social media in terms of human resources, what it means to people. I think undeniably our future employees will be a generation of people who routinely use social media. And this might be alien to some of us, but social media probably has a very positive impact. If you think about it from an employer's perspective, it gives excellent opportunities, apart from just to advertise vacancies, but to raise the profile of our industry. And we can do that in many different ways. So a really good tool in which we can easily flagship our industry. Of course, there's a downside, and that is that social media can be used actually for people who have had poor experiences in the industry. And I have seen examples a bit like TripAdvisor for jobs, people saying don't work there, it's awful. You know, word gets around. And particularly some of the hard to fill vacancies, some of the things that traditionally have been difficult. How will social media impact on that? But I think it's something we know little about, but it will have a significant influence. Number 9, I think when we think about people working in tourism, I think there's more emphasis now from a social responsibility side to look at people from all walks of life and people doing many, many different jobs in the sector. We know a lot about those who are employed in the formal sector, but much less so about the many millions who are employed informally. Maybe people who sell things on beaches, or street vendors, or people that are not as well represented. Social responsibility is definitely more in people's minds, and it's about how we can provide a good experience for our workforce. In this area, the UNWTO and the ILO collective have been doing some significant work looking at the decent work agenda and how some of that might filter through to travel and tourism. And it's looking at things like decent work, employment opportunities, social security, providing a safe work environment. So I think an increased awareness that the people are important and we need to look after them. And then finally, a final trend I think relates to destination image. We know that destinations are key to the travel and tourism product. Destinations are in everybody's minds where tourism happens, where it's very visible, where it takes place. Now, of course, the people that work in the industry are fundamentally a part of that destination. And so people's skills, people's levels of education, the availability of people to work are all crucial in managing a destination. And one of the things we know very little about is how people influence that destination image and perhaps issues of authenticity as the destination. If people are moving around, then could this mean that a typical tourism worker doesn't exist anymore? How do we keep ourselves unique and authentic in a world of increasing mobility? So there we have it, 10 minutes he said. I think that's about 10 minutes. Things for the future to think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Adele. Since Adele will be here, so I'm not going to take questions now, and I'll invite my good colleague Richard, who is our sports Richard. You can see him in Bournemouth running for about a couple of hours, and then you can see him on the local bar regaining strength quite often. And Richard is going to talk about something very, very interesting with the Olympics happening in the UK. We are doing quite a lot of research in Bournemouth University about Olympic sports and the impact of all these things to the economy and society. Can I ask you please to occupy every possible chair, because there's a capacity issue in the room, and for the safety regulations we cannot have more than 20 people standing at any time. So any chair, please occupy it so we can have more people coming here. Thank you. Richard.
Thanks, Lee. Good afternoon. Over the next 10 minutes, I'd just like to profile one specific area at BU where we're focusing on, which is our Olympic tourism research agenda. I think I'd like to profile the variety of projects we've had developing over the past 5 years linked to sport tourism events, ranging from economic impacts to resident perceptions, and projects which have been funded by significant research councils and also industry by the old regional development agencies and through national governing bodies such as the RYA. And some of our students are actually engaged in PhD related research. I think this kicked off from last year. We were involved in a session on the main stage last year which looked at the diversity of not just Olympic tourism but sport tourism. And I think really when you look out the window and you can see the Olympic Stadium and you're here today in an Olympic venue where the boxing events will take place, we look at the tourism impacts of spectator-driven sports, but we'd also like to profile the opportunities. And I'd say the Olympics is the icing on the cake for sport tourism, but it's not the cake itself. You know, there's a diverse project in terms of active participation across cycling, golf, winter sports, water sports, cycling, and a diverse range of activities. This kicked off for us about 3 years ago when Bournemouth were co-organisers of the first Commonwealth Sport Tourism Conference in Malaysia. And off of the back of that conference, we put together a report, jointly myself, Professor Leo Jago and Professor Alan File, where we looked at some of the key emerging trends at that time. I haven't got time to go into them today, but ones which I do want to focus on are the research agenda and issues linked to legacy and also the visitor experience. We've also published extensively across the diverse range of areas looking at Olympics, but not just the tourism dimension. And at Bournemouth, we're very, very keen on looking at interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research, which looks not just at the tourism impacts, but the health impacts, the community impacts, and wider engagement issues. The central core down this next presentation, which was given in Beijing, looks at the wider impacts of the Olympics across business development, tourism, community engagement, cultural engagement, and sporting opportunity. And at Bournemouth, we've currently got projects which are looking at all 5 of those areas across the region. I think this really took an Olympic focus back in 2008 when we were awarded an Economic and Social Research Council project looking at 3 areas, looking at community engagement, sports participation and tourism flows. We've got various experts at Bournemouth who have looked at this in great depth, and this kick-started our whole research agenda. I think the important thing linked to Olympic tourism legacy was looking at not just during those 16 days of looking at how we can leverage this before, during and after the Games. And we have a predetermined research agenda which will go beyond 2012 when the trains pull out of the station at Stratford on the final day of the Paralympic Games. Our second event was a business engagement event, yet again aligned with what we do at Bournemouth in terms of engaging with industry, but our more profile one was the third one, which was funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, which looked at the wider impacts of Olympic and sport tourism. We were able to fund 17 early career researchers to travel to various events across 11 HE institutions in the UK. About half of those actually had an Olympic tourism focus. I'd just like to spend the last sort of five minutes or so just profiling some of these projects, just to illustrate how we're engaged in research, but also how we work on a national and international stage and across universities. One of the most high-profile projects was looking at the cultural legacy of the Olympic Games. My colleague, Dr. Nancy Stevenson, is in the room this morning, who's done extensive work within the Borough of Hackney, and we supported that project, but it was led by Nancy in conjunction with the IOC. We've also looked, yet again, outside the tourism dimension, Kate Hughes from Leeds Met and also Donna Wong from University of Central Lancashire at this sports participation legacy. Lord Coe says there will be a sports participation legacy, but how do we deliver that legacy? And Donna's currently in Singapore looking at doing work off of the back of the F1 Grand Prix and working with the Singapore Sports Council. I was fortunate enough to travel to Beijing in 2008 and look at it from the perspective of the spectator, see what motivates these people to travel to these events. Is it the first yellow thing there? Is it because you're to celebrate your identity? Is it because you're following an athlete, say Usain Bolt? Is it because you follow that sport? Or is it the fourth theme in terms of identity? You just go to the Olympics because people travel regularly. And I think this is an area where we don't really understand why people are coming to the Games and whether or not they're repeat visitors. We also had 2 other researchers active on the ground in Beijing during 2008. First one was Dr. Shinar Lee from Leeds Met, who worked with my colleague Adam Blake, who did the 2004 Olympic Games impact study while he was at Nottingham for DCMS, who looked at the economic impact, and they've published extensively on that, as has my colleague Dr. Yue Meng, who works within our media school, which looks at the Olympic sponsorship and is currently looking at work linked to the torch relay as it comes through the UK. So I think really what I'm just briefly trying to summarise there is the diversity of activity in this Olympic tourism domain where we're operating in. More on the ground, we also have PhD students and ex-colleagues who are working currently on PhD-related impacts, looking at the impacts on the communities. As we sit 2 miles away from the venue, my colleague Debbie is actually engaged in PhD research linked to that, as is our ex-colleague Holly Henderson, who is one of the city operations managers who works down at Lowcock for at the moment in terms of looking at the impact that will have across the whole of the UK, looking at not just the tourism impact within the M25, but also at the regions and whether or not it will have a wider benefit. We've also engaged in various social impact, moving away from just not the economic and looking at a more holistic view in terms of some of the wider impacts. And we've got a longitudinal study over 6 years where we're monitoring how people's perceptions have changed of the Games. Increases, decreases, issues linked to transport infrastructure, consultation, across that. To summarise and wind down now, I think really it's the point that I made in terms of, yes, we know the Olympics is coming, the Olympics will go, but we still have an extensive opportunity here across trends linked to active sports participation. Not just people who sit and spectate at events as fans, but those who actively participate. And I think this was what we discussed last year in the main suite when we looked at sport tourism and not just Olympic tourism, is some of these trends, the increased interest in health and fitness, the increased opportunities for people in their older years, and also the experiences and values, looking at visitor experiences of female participants as an underdeveloped area. And also, I mean, we're from Bournemouth where we're seeing a massive growth in the developments in alternative sports, kite surfing, stand-up paddleboarding, which we are actually looking to leverage and develop, and as are other regions. So, To summarise today of my point, put a sort of an academic conceptual sort of understanding to this, I think really we're looking to move our agenda at Bournemouth. We've delivered over the past 5 years. We will continue to deliver in consultation with our colleagues internationally, but also across other UK institutions. We're looking at innovative approaches we can take to this. We've had funding on various areas. I mean, for example, we want to get in the live sites during the games and looking at the technology of how people are tagged and looking at how they move around, where they radiate towards. Secondly, we are in a world where we realise that we need to assess the impacts. We need to look at a holistic evaluation across not just the economic, but also the social and environmental impacts of these major events. And I think from an academic's point of view, I think we're interested in looking just outside of tourism, but also working with other disciplines. Health, personally, is one within the School of Tourism. We work extensively with health organisations, looking at the wider impacts that tourism can have on health and well-being. And I think, really, what underpins a lot of our work at the moment is this internationalisation and our drive towards using the expertise which we have at Bournemouth and across other institutions to work with other host nations, previous host nations and also future host nations. So we'd be interested in talking about Brazil in a few years' time, of taking some of our research forward. But what underpins this, the final point, is that we're looking at delivering outputs which are accessible to practitioners and aren't just based on our curiosity, but actually have some meaning. So I think in summary, we are engaged. We would like to continue being engaged in the whole Olympic stroke sport tourism agenda beyond 2012. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. Richard, would you like to come on the panel, please? And can I ask Adele to come along as well? So these were the three presentations that we had for you today. I'll ask our panelists to say a few words and the three key issues that they see for the future. And I'll ask our first panelist, John Kent, to see the three major things that he's seeing that they influence the future of tourism. John, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah.
There's a microphone just next to you. Please use it.
Hello, everybody. Hi. So what I can see is, so number one is product differentiation. I believe everybody, at least on the leisure industry, on the leisure side, they are moving to differentiate their product. And I give you an example. So we have resort hotels around the world, and I believe what the tour operators and the people, so the end consumer is looking right now is a differentiated product. For example, a hotel for adults only, or a hotel with water parks, a super family hotel, or a hotel which gets involved with a lot of activities and experiences. Like, for example, in one of our hotels, we had this year cooking, lessons to learn how to cook Japanese, yeah, and various other activities. So I believe that, and I can see that from the tour operators as well, that they are looking for hotels which they differentiate themselves, and it's not only sun and the beach. So that's what I believe is happening, and so every year is going to have a growth on that. The second is another trend I can see is that, which in UK is quite matured, dynamic packaging has a huge growth. I think the numbers in UK, which I'm not, so I don't think we have exact percentages, but I believe it's about 35% of the market. I'm talking again about leisure destinations, yeah. So if we think about 10 years ago, early 2000, we had 100% of the leisure holidays booked via the traditional tour operators we know, TUI, Thomas Cook, First Choice Air Tours at the time, etc. Today, I think they lost. This company is about 35% market share to the dynamic packaging, which every travel agent or every online tour operator they can create, and most of the times they can be cheaper than a tour operator as well. And the reason is mainly the aviation, because the tour operator has a fixed, if you want, price on the aviation, and most of them they own the airline, compared to a travel agent or an online tour operator, which they have the facility to to shop, if you want, from around the web, from various low-cost carriers, so charter airlines and scheduled flights. And that's why I believe the packages they've been created by the dynamic model, they are much cheaper in the same hotel sometimes, so than to buy the same hotel from a major tour operator. Unfortunately, this model is very mature in UK. That's why I mentioned an approximately 35% of the market, and is not in Europe, is not in the rest of Europe. For example, in Germany, it's under 10%, maybe under 5%, I'm not sure, which is a very big market like UK. In Scandinavia, which the internet penetration is very high, it's about 90%. The dynamic packaging less than 5%. In France is less than 10%. So I believe I can see a huge growth in dynamic packaging, still in UK. In UK, it's approximately 5% year on year now. But the big potential is outside UK in this model. And I believe even the traditional tour operators, they know that. And that's why the last 5 years, they made acquisitions of online players in order to, if you want to become to this sector faster than they could do it organically. And the last one, if you want 3, Dimitri, I forgot my third one, I'll give you in a minute. Sorry, my BlackBerry is not working.
It's not only me who is suffering from BlackBerries.
No. I'm very anti-iPhone. And the third one is new markets. I believe, and I've seen in the presentation before, the 80% which they are within region right now. I believe this is going to expand. And so the 3 main regions, which I believe is China, ex-Soviet Union, if we call it this way, and India. So for the moment, we can see a trend from China to Europe, for example, but it's mainly in city destinations, and which is very logical because they haven't seen what is London, what is Paris, what is Brussels, etc. I believe this is going to move to leisure. When the airline, the aviation cost is going to go lower, as we've seen before as well. And that's another trend I can see. I can see this 80%, in my opinion, is going to be lower. So we're going to have a higher percentage in outside region, leisure holidays.
Thank you, John. That's great. On the new market specifically and the social media, Jens, would you like to share with us your 3 predictions?
Sure. I mean, I think there was almost like as it is planned. I run a company in China called Dragon Trail. Anyone who's interested in the Chinese market and can see me later, and we also have some presentations around it, and we did a book about essential China travel trends in collaboration with UNWTO, WTTC, and PATA. But my 3 prediction is number 1, especially to the Chinese market, that the Chinese market is growing, especially from a travel standpoint, both on the domestic and the outbound tourism market, but also inbound. As UNWTO just announced a couple of days ago in the Tourism Ministers Summit that the growth in China in terms of outbound tourism was 32%, and I believe in India was actually 42%, what Secretary General said, and 32% in Russia. So all these markets are growing. China had 30% growth in terms of outbound tourism, and the UNWTO predicts that by 2020 it's going to be over 100 million, and probably it's going to hit around 65 million in 2011. So it's a huge market, both that will impact the European markets and markets in Latin America, in the Americas, and Africa, and so on. So that's the first trend. The second trend, also as it relates to China, is that there is a shift in consumer behavior when it comes to travel in China. And that's a shift from a price-based model to an experience-based model. What I mean by that is that right now, when we kind of look at the Chinese tourist, we get a vision of a person with a flag and 35 to 50 people following, and they're going on a bus, and then they go to a site, and they all go out for 5 minutes, take a picture, go back on the bus, then stop at a Chinese restaurant, and then go to a souvenir shop, where when they turn around the souvenirs, it says made in China. So obviously, this is nothing that anyone would like to do. This is basically was created based on really a price-based model where people are looking to travel the world inexperienced travelers, 10 countries in 5 days, very extreme, and then go home and basically say, okay, I've seen the Eiffel Tower, I've also seen Big Ben, and I've also seen the Tower of Pisa and everything in 3 days. So this is changing now, where people are saying, well, you know what, I have money, I'm very busy, I have my own company in China, I work for a big company, and I want to do what I want to experience. This is all more like the younger population, and actually affluent people in China are on average 20 to 25 years younger compared to affluent people in the US and in Europe and Australia. So this is important to kind of look at, and it's moving from these traditional tour groups to what we call either semi-FIT. It's not totally FIT yet, but it's semi-FIT, and smaller groups, and these are mostly high-end. So we do a lot of stuff with Canada, with Malaysia, so we see that development. And the third trend, to keep it short, is that the internet is a major influencer when it comes to really looking at building brands in China. That's not just on the travel side, obviously, it's also on the retail side and other brands. But we see that 80% today use the internet for planning purposes. So I mean, if you're looking to, if they're looking to go to Greece or go stay at a hotel, if there is not a relevant Chinese website there, they may not go. And I would even take it further. We've done research on our content site, ChinaTravelTrends.com, where we found out that irrelevant Chinese website, Chinese people associate them with bad offline experiences. So basically it means if you just put up a website and it's not relevant, the content is not translated correctly, it has maybe links to Facebook and YouTube and sites like that are blocked in China, people would say, well, you know what, you don't understand me, so how can you provide a good experience for me? So that's important to remember. I mentioned that Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Foursquare and other sites are blocked. However, the Chinese social media space is more influential and more engaged than anywhere else in the world. 92% of people, internet users in China, engage in social media, and the social media platforms in China are actually more relevant and more engaged than compared to other parts of the world. So people always ask us, well, what happens if Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and so on get unblocked one day? And we say nothing will happen. People won't shift back to these sites. And when we talk about influence, there was a study out called the Digital Influence Index last year, which compared various countries from Canada, US, France, Germany, UK, Japan and China in terms of the influence level. And it came out that in the US, 22% of US people, Americans, say that the internet will be more influential in the next 2 years. In China, it's 85%. And when we look at microblogging, Twitter and so on, 22% or 23% in the US trust a company more than microblogs, using Twitter and engaging on Twitter. In China, it's 95%. 95%, meaning basically if a brand or destination doesn't microblog in China, Twitter being blocked, so it's Sina Weibo and QQ Weibo, you basically do not exist as a brand in China. It is that simple. And we see still with a lot of tourist boards, countries, hotel brands that go into China and say, okay, let's go to the tour operators and work with the big ones, CITS, CTS and wherever they are, let's do some events. It basically will not work anymore, And one reason for that is that the affluence is shifting from the big cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, to second, third, and fourth tier cities like Chengdu, Dalian, Guilin, Nanning, Xiamen, and other ones, and you will not be able to reach them with the traditional way of doing it through tour operators and so on. That's where the internet becomes very powerful. I could go on, but
let's leave the discussion to when we'll come back to that.
If you are interested in the whole China market, you can visit our site dragontrail.com. We also have done this book, Essential China Travel Trends. You can go to ChinaTravelTrendsBook.com, and we've done a presentation that we presented, and you go to slideshare.net/dragontrail. If you still want information, you can send me an email. So
you'll catch again later. Thank you very much. Our next speaker who will introduce some of the issues, particularly for the aviation industry, is Gerald Brown from Roots UK. Would you like to say briefly what Roots UK does? Because obviously some people may not be familiar.
Surely, yeah. I work for a company called Roots, and Roots every year has a series of events. One of the largest is the World Route Development Forum, which is an annual event, been happening for the past 20 years, where the world's airlines, airports and tourism authorities sit down to have one-to-one, face-to-face meetings to decide on the air services of the future. So literally, where you and I are going to be taking our holidays over the next, 3 to 10 years, all of those decisions are made and discussed at Roots events. So it's an interesting set of events. I joined the organisation 4 years ago, and I've been in travel and tourism for, about 16 years now. And prior to joining Roots, I wasn't aware of the whole field of route development, and I didn't really sort of initially see why it was just an aviation sort of set of events and not tourism, because quite clearly tourism is a massive impact at Roots. Moving on to where I see the future, really, I see it as the further strengthening of the low-cost carriers, quite simply. When I joined the travel and tourism industry, it was very much, the setup was you had travel agents, and travel agents would book you a holiday through a tour operator, and you'd go away on your holiday. And now it's just changed massively. You used to have the big four. It used to be this is in the UK. It used to be First Choice, My Travel, TUI, Thomas Cook. Now it's the big two. 20 years ago, when I was just starting out, there was one low-cost carrier in the UK, and that was a very small little startup called Ryanair, which had 7 aircraft, which were turboprops at the time. Now operating in and around the UK, there's 5 or 6 different low-cost carriers which operate 732 aircraft. So the whole dynamic's changed massively, and I think that's set to continue. I think really it's fair to say that the low-cost carriers are becoming the new tour operators. So more and more, when I'm speaking to the ministries for tourism and the national tourism authorities downstairs at World Travel Market, and I speak to them, I say, what are you here for? What are you looking to achieve? And they say, well, we want to speak to the people that can impact more visitors to our destination. Who are you looking to speak with? And traditionally they've always been sort of saying, well, the big two in the UK, the big two tour operators. And then I have to remind them that actually it's the low-cost carriers which shift far more tourists than the big two in the UK, and that maybe they should be having conversations with the low-cost carriers instead. So I think that's one of the trends, and I think it echoes what John was saying, really, linked in with the dynamic packaging. What's another interesting sort of movement for, I think, everybody to keep an eye on, and I'm certainly keeping an eye on this, is the penchant for low-cost carriers to start selling accommodation as well. They literally are. It's going full circle. They're effectively becoming tour operators, but their starting point has been with the aircraft side of things. And then now it's more, they're looking to ancillaries. So I was speaking to EasyJet recently, and they were telling me that they're looking at being full to about sort of 80% capacity on most of their aircraft. So the next question for them is that of yield, really, getting more money out of every passenger. So it's about ancillary add-ons. So I think that you're going to see more of this, where they're going to be selling the hotel accommodation, the car hire, and you'll see it on the website. So now when you look at a low-cost carrier's website, I would challenge you to differentiate it from a tour operator's website. That they're kind of blurring, and the lines are blurring, and I expect that to continue certainly into the next 10 years. So that's the big change, I think. My second point would be the new types of aircraft which are coming out now. I'm sure many of you are aware of the 787 Dreamliner. I know that Dermot's more than aware, in that his former organisation was one of the largest first orders of the 787. For those of you that don't know, the 787 Dreamliner, it's got a longer range for a narrow-bodied aircraft. So this is aircraft that take about 200, 280 passengers, and they can go further than any of the current aircraft of that kind of size. So what's the big deal with that? You're probably thinking, well, 747s and 777s, they can do all of that. A380s, they can fly very far. The interesting is, it's down to the economics of different flight routes. But now all of a sudden, maybe in the past, there wasn't the rationale and the business case to send 400 or 500 people, meaning a plane full for a 777 or a 747, to Sri Lanka, for example, from Manchester. But maybe there is a business case for 200 passengers a week. Well, if there is, now we've got the aircraft that can just take 200 passengers a week, rather than just having 200 passengers on a 747. So the economics on that are a lot stronger. So what you're going to find, again, once these new aircraft start coming out, and the 787-900 will be coming out shortly, and that does even further distances, on that one you'll be able to go from the UK, from Northern Europe to Australia non-stop. And again with smaller passenger loads. So you're going to start finding that there's a lot of new destinations which will be coming out, and that you'll be seeing them again. If you book with tour operators, you'll be seeing new destinations coming out. I know that I speak to, for example, the Mexican Tourism Board, Ministry of Tourism, and they're telling me they want to attract the Russian market. And one of the issues has been the range of getting from Russia to Mexico. With these new breed of aircraft, all of a sudden it opens up. So I think that's another trend. I've only got two for you, so forgive me, but I'll leave it at the two. Thank you.
I'm sure that we'll come back to the discussion.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Let me say goodbye to Marcio, who is flying back to Madrid, and say thank you very much for being with us.
All the best.
He spent an hour and a half trying to be here. Our last speaker is our good friend Dermot Blastland, who until recently was in charge of TUI, and since the volcano problems a year and a half ago, I've promised to be very, very good to Dermot and all the tour operators, because they rescued me out of Barcelona. But I think there are several discussions that, and several issues that they've merged out of the discussions that I'm sure that Dermot will be addressing.
Yeah, I haven't got any three, but I'll probably get three as I wander around. The point about the internet I thought was interesting, and I had an experience of a poor website. I have to my son's 18th birthday or parties this Saturday, and I had the honour of organising the restaurant and paying for it. And my friend recommended it's a very nice restaurant in just off Sloane Square, Rasoi. I can't remember the rest of the name. It's a Michelin-starred chef. And someone said, great, fantastic room. Said to my son, well, let's go here. Also, there's a place called the Red Fort in Soho, which burnt down, and has just been done up. Great restaurant. And he wouldn't entertain either of them. One was the Rasoi had a very poor website, so he said, therefore, the website, the restaurant's crap. The Red Fort, which is a great Indian restaurant, was saying, oh, we're just building it. So it's quite interesting. But much research at Thompson's, which is the market leader in the UK, the largest holiday company, was the importance on photography on the website. Absolutely critical. And there's a lot of effort goes into, and occasionally you'd be looking at the sales, and the computers are monitoring the sales of hotels, year over year, rate of sale, the price you're getting. You'll suddenly see a fantastic property being down 40%. And of course, you immediately make up stories. You know, it's amazing how much you can create from very few facts. You have a hypothesis why there's this, and then eventually some guy bothers to look at the website and realizes either there's no photo or some guys put the wrong one in. So it's amazing the attention that should go in that. I mean, my observation here was I joined the tourism industry from Bournemouth, actually, when it was a college in 1970, and I was looking at similar figures, and it was the same, and you just think, well, this is an industry to join. And just sitting here today, you'd think there's fantastic growth, and clearly it is still an industry. However, I think the growth is going to be quite interesting, because you've got the European market is experienced and sophisticated. You've got highly knowledgeable customers, so you're going to get a different type of growth from the European outbound markets than you are going to get, say, in the Far East, in Asia. And you can see the difference, and Russia is one of the big areas that TUI have invested in. They see that as almost less, 235 million, I think. They're the market leader to Turkey, they're the market leader to Sharm el-Sheikh, and having a major impact on prices and so forth. However, they are behaving very much like the growth in Europe 20, 30 years ago. Undifferentiated, a complete herd of volume. They're desperate to travel. And that will be very much a commodity-based, price is everything, quality is not such an issue. However, you then come to the German, the Scandinavian, the British markets, very sophisticated customers, and they sometimes will go for a cheap product. They'll do it themselves, dynamically packaging. I'm now a director of an online travel agent, and but its revenue per passenger is half of what the big holiday companies are. It's the bottom end. And people saying, no, I know that's an okay unit, I'm not bothered, I know the place, but I'm going there cheap. You then have what you call the real holiday. So you'll get a split, and John mentioned this differentiated product, and that's the focus of the big holiday companies, particularly TUI have done it very well. They want differentiated products, clearly targeted products at different segments. If you want a luxury, if you want all-inclusive, if you're going with a young family, if you're going with older family. And they've tailored products that are very difficult to go onto the web and do yourself. I remember Richard Branson of Virgin, I can't remember, and I've heard this, if I've heard it once in my life, I've heard it 100. Everyone launches something and they're going to become the Thompsons of the holiday industry in the UK in 10 years' time, and they all hit the dust. Now, Virgin had a great brand, and he had a low-cost carrier called Virgin Express, but he just didn't realise that actually the success was having all the key hotels in the frontline resorts, in all the best resorts and the best hotel. So product is still, but that'll be a characteristic feature of the European outbound. Quality, differentiated, not easy to match, and you have to put a lot of effort in. People know if you're all front, they know it quite quickly, and if you try and charge premiums for crap, then you're out of business. So growth and I think quality, particularly on the outbound, is going to be crucial. Again, that comes back to an experienced customer base, but the quality of systems, support, the web, and then I think it does support the point you're making about getting very, very good on training, and you do have to have your staff up in the summer, or your representatives, or your cabin crew, but the training and sophisticating and how you can get very bright, enthusiastic people to actually deliver quite quickly is down to the intelligence of good management teams thinking it through and how to make it easy for people to do a great job. I use, just as a personal example, just Toyota, and you go into a garage there and then and just fixing it the way they do it, they can tell you when parts are in, and that's because somebody in Toyota has sat back and said, how can we make these guys in the garages who are not genetically inclined to give good service, they're more interested in figuring out how your cars fall into bits. But they thought, no, it's clear, you can book your slot, you can have it, wait and have a coffee while they do the service, or they tell you straight away, they'll say, we've got all the parts in stock, they don't have to move. But that's all because someone's put a lot of effort in to give that individual, when you go into the Toyota garage, to enable service. And I think that's true, completely true in travel, all the way through airlines, through check-in at airports, the whole industry. I think particularly the UK has got to pay a lot of attention to the customer experience at what one of my colleagues used to call the black holes, which is the departure airport in the UK and the arrival airport in whatever destination it is. I don't know if those are points, but oh, and the differentiation, the Dreamliner, for instance. I've heard about low-cost carriers again. That's another one that's you hear forever. I'm not sure how you're going to go from Glasgow to Vietnam or Cardiff to Hawaii when TUI get the Dreamliner. So again, that's another characteristic of differentiation, of actually choosing. So I mean, TUI has invested in 24 Dreamliners, and the issue with that is it's going to bring what used to be far away destinations, they're going to feel just very close to you. Staggering. And it'll avoid all this hubbing over big monster airports. So you can have these aircraft that can take off from Bristol and take you straight to Hawaii. And the aircraft size that TUI have chosen is the 800, I think, which is a smaller plane, and it's going to be a phenomenal world to be operating.
Excellent, thank you very much. Thank you. So now we have got I've gone through our panel, and there are two things to do. Entry to this event is free. Exit is by donation to Just a Drop. So we've got some buckets here. So when you go out, this is our charity that we support. Please drop some coins in there. So that's number one. Number two is whoever is going to ask questions is going to get a personalized, fantastic super present from us to remember where to find us again. Georgina has got the microphone. The time is now 20 minutes past, so we've got about 40 minutes for questions. And we've got the first question. So can you please say who you are, what you do, and what perfume you wear? Yeah?
Well, I will skip.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah?
Is it okay? No? No, it's okay now. Well, I will skip the perfume information. I'm coming from Croatian Association of Travel Agencies, and I'm the member of European Association of Travel Agents and Tour Operators. And what we miss here, that we have Travel Package Directive, and that European Commission will strengthen the rules for dynamic packaging, and Ryanair, EasyJet, and the rest of low-cost carriers actually should become tour operators. And according to some perspective, it's not likely. I expected that Mr. Blasland will say that. I think it's not in a perspective that we'll have less organized travel, because if we
Let's
will
keep
open
it to questions, not statements.
exactly.
Yeah?
What do you think? What will happen just when you take in consideration Travel Package Directive? I think we will have much more organized travel, because outbound travel from Europe we'll see. We saw, and I think that it will be the biggest part of the outbound travel to another regions.
Dermot, would you like to take this?
Wasn't quite sure what the question was the package travel directive was going to increase packages? Was going to increase the number of people who would be in packages as opposed to dynamic?
And whether actually...
said that there will be more individual travel and more dynamic packaging.
So,
okay.
the legal
More
framework,
organized
basically.
travel, because Travel Package Directive will stay still strong, even stronger.
Yeah, for those who don't understand the package travel directive, if you buy a flight, if you're a package holiday company, there is a regulation that's a bit of a pain up the arse, actually. But
is this a technical term? Yeah.
Yeah. It was invented by the French, who've got one of the smallest package travel industries, and imposed on Germany and the UK. But I mean, it does. In fairness, there's nothing wrong with it. It's saying if you book a package, then there are responsibilities, and you should be expect to be treated decently. Within the UK, there's a different argument as to say that the cost of doing that are not currently apply to if you book yourself with a low-cost carrier and then you go to a bed bank and book the, or if, and particularly if you say go onto EasyJet and then go into their bed bank and then book the hotel, then they avoid the cost of protecting you, is the argument. So I think the view is, I mean, and there's obviously the EU is currently discussing all of this. Whereas, I mean, I think there's two ways. Is one, they should either just say all travel by flight, whether you just book the flight or book a flight, plus think it should be protected in some way, and that's it, or not at all. And in the UK in particular, we got into a complete mess. So I don't think it. I think it's not a question of you'll be going on a package. I think it would be just saying if you do a dynamic package where you've put it, so you will still get the same protection. I think, which would be a good news.
John, as the father of dynamic packaging here, would you like? The question is really about how the legislation going to affect dynamic packaging and the European directive for tour operating and packaging, whether it will affect people buying individually.
To be honest with you, so Dermot was very right. So the last 18 months we've seen in UK, it's a case on High Court right now, and a year ago. So CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, which They give the license to the tour operators. So they claim for a bed bank that so they haven't paid VAT and they weren't acting as principal. So that means they had the full liability like every tour operator has. They got them to court, they won. So the bed bank appealed, and a few months ago the bed bank won. And now it's an appeal from the CAA back to the bed bank. So that's absolutely right. We don't know what's going to happen. On the other hand, the best example I can give is every consumer, they have to look after who they book with, if they are bonded or not, how reputable they are. For example, if you go to US, which is a huge market, but mainly domestic market, so they don't exist civil aviation authority license and things like that, and in many European countries. So you go to, for example, to Delta Airlines, you book your flight, you go to a bed bank or Expedia or whatever, you book your hotel or your flight and your hotel, and that's it. So this is a very UK, I think, matter. Which CAA used to make a lot of money through bonds from the tour operators, millions every year. On the other hand, they covered many failures during the years, and so nobody can blame them. That is the most strict, I believe, country in the world on the license matter.
Thank you. We have another question here. Would you like to say who you are? Where you work, what perfume you wear. You've got a question as well? You pay extra for that, you realize, yeah? That's fine.
Hello, my name is James Davis-Mann. Study in travel and tourism management at Norwich and also starting up a company. I'm in my third year and doing a dissertation on the future of transportation. So the Dreamliner is, of course, something I'm looking at a lot. Another thing I was looking at is Virgin Galactic and how they're thinking of doing orbital flights that will enable transportation within hours, literally 3 hours from Britain to Australia. How long do you think that is going to take? And no, I'm not going to answer on the perfume.
You can answer that.
Could be a very quick answer. Being really honest, I don't know. It depends. I don't understand what the infrastructure is needed on the airport side of things. I mean, are they called airports where they take off from with the Galactic? I don't know.
Base opened in New Mexico.
Right.
Opened a couple of weeks ago.
So you got to get a New Mexico.
So I think. I mean, I would imagine with different legislative issues as well. I would imagine it's at least 20 years off. I don't know what they're sort of saying in the press, but. Anybody that will tell you that's involved in anything to do with air transport, the slightest of changes that you want to make will take absolutely donkey's years. So I was in an environmental conference recently, and we were talking about what we can do to obviously make flying a little bit more environmentally friendly, for want of a better word, if that's not a paradox of some kind. And one of the issues was they're saying that in the holding queues, currently, at Heathrow, you'll be held in a holding queue and a holding stack up above. And they're saying that actually if you could raise that stack a little bit higher where the air is thinner, you'll burn less fuel, which sounds absolutely perfect, wouldn't be any great issue to do. But in order to actually get everybody and all the different aviation authorities to agree on that will take apparently about 20 years. So I would say you're talking way off. That's the short answer.
Thank you. More questions?
Does that help?
John, you had a question. Can I see how many people would like to ask questions, so I'll see how restrictive chair I'll be. Yeah, we have got one there. Okay, the others are thinking. John, you can have a question.
Yeah, I have a question.
And you can have a present as well. And give this guy a master's brochure, yeah? Because he's finished with it. Yeah, go on.
I have a question for Adele. Hello, Adele.
Hello.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
So you mentioned earlier that the 44% of the workforce of the travel industry in UK are under 30. Mm-hmm. Do you have any analysis on...
John, you need to speak to the mic because we're recording, yeah?
Hello.
Don't destroy it, ideally.
You can hear me now, yeah?
Thank you.
So do you have any analysis why is that? So why the 44% of the workforce is under 30?
Interestingly, not a huge amount. There are some assumptions made, and a lot of it is to do with relative to the transient workforce. It attracts people who perhaps don't know what they want to do and therefore at the early stages of their career and join the industry perhaps a little bit undecided, or maybe they're seeing working in the industry as a stepping point for somewhere else. So actually we know not a great deal about it, but the assumption is it's to do with that transitory nature and people choosing it and not really having any great assumption that they will stay in the industry. People first, I think, are looking at it. So there are people that are attempting to analyse that. But yes, that's as far as we've got.
Actually, I agree with you because so I believe, and I don't have any numbers, but I say that from experience, 18 consecutive years in UK in the travel industry, from very small travel agents to very big companies.
Absolutely.
And I could see that the most of the workforce which are under 30, it's exactly what you said now, and the most of them, they move to another industry.
Yes.
And I believe the reason they moved to another industry, in my opinion, is because they didn't have enough training. The most of them, they didn't have any, if you want, so the background wasn't a university on tourism, or a degree on tourism, or so even a college or something. So they came to the travel industry by luck. So they had a little training from the tour operator or the travel agent they work with. And the most of them, they get out from the travel industry, maybe even so before they reach 30. And very few of them, they are staying. Actually, maybe not very few, I don't know. I'm guessing a number of 20-30%. And you can see, and if you go on the other side to the management positions, to the top executives in the industry, especially in UK again, because in Germany it's slightly different, in my opinion. So you can see examples which, so they became number one in a top tour operator, CEO of a tour operator, and they haven't even been to a university, not on a tourism degree, on any degree, which is not. Don't take me wrong. I don't. So this is so well done to them, and well done to what they achieved. And I know, for example, a specific case which started as a rep. In a resort area, and well done to this person, became a CEO of a tour operator, one of the biggest in Europe. But I believe our industry needs more training and more education. We don't have, and that's why it's low paid as well, compared to other industries.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly we do lose people, and a lot of our graduates will maybe enter the industry and perhaps do 2 or 3 years, find they're not moving quick enough and leave. Evidence suggests that if people break through that, they possibly do very well. So there's some very good success stories, but we do lose a lot of people in those early stages. So yeah, I would support everything you've said. And I agree. So Dimitris told me yesterday when I was in BU, so that you are having 50 PhD students now in.
Yeah, we've got 50 PhD.
Which is an amazing number. I couldn't believe the number.
And the other thing that's very encouraging is that a lot of companies are coming to us now to ask for personalized training for their companies. So we just deliver a training course for Pestana hotels in Portugal. 4 of my colleagues flew out to Porto, and we had 160 people, including their chairman. And we did a fantastic job for a couple of days with them. So a lot of companies are now start understanding that competitive advantage is based on intellect, and intellect is based on education, training, and being able to understand the big issues. Can we have the microphone on this side? No, you cannot, because the camera does not take this. Yes. But you'll have to say who you are, what you do, and what perfume you wear.
Hi, hello. My name is Radka Budziwa, and I'm studying at Westminster University, my 3rd year. And I'm doing research. Actually, I will follow the question because I'm doing the research on the succession planning. So I would like to ask, actually, if you see the succession planning as a critical process with regards to actually train the potential successors within the tourism industry.
When you say succession planning, of what?
Succession planning within the tourism organizations.
So if someone retires, what happens next in that sense?
Yes, kind of within the training the potential leaders, potential successors within the organization. Do you think that this is kind of way forward again?
Okay. Adele, would you like to take that, and perhaps Dermon would like to say a few words afterwards, having been in that kind of position recently?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would say absolutely yes. I mean, succession planning is, I feel, crucial. I think we could probably do it better in education as well. So certainly, I think it's a very important issue. In terms of how companies are addressing it, I don't know. So I'm going to pass that on. I don't have an example to give you.
Dermot, what happened in your case?
Well, if you take TUI, where there's 16,000 in the is the employment base. I mean, it's all pretty organised. You know, you've got your top 300 managers, then the next 800, and there's development programs, and they're all being moved around. You know, so they can build, so they can come up. You go down to the retail network and cabin crew and overseas staff. So it's all pretty organised. One of the problems, so it's not a problem actually. It's one of the views. Although TUI and TUI UK is obviously in the tourism industry, because of its size, actually much of its, if it wants IT people, it doesn't need necessarily people in IT who are from the travel industry, running an airline and engineers and all the stuff, and even the WebEx. So you actually find the fact that the product or what we sell to customers is a travel experience. Many of the people employed in it, particularly the UK base, I mean, really, you're after disciplines. You know, you want bright people to go into the marketing, bright people in systems, accountants, and all the rest of it. I think, but at least there is a proper, and then eventually part of moving people around from whatever discipline they come in, eventually they then gain travel experience. So when they become senior in the group, then actually they are then travel professionals, but they've come from a different professional base. I think one of the issues is when you move out, is, you know, that's okay for a big company. I think then travel is made up of lots and lots of small companies, 20, 30, 40 people, and I don't know how you get professional development there. And so I think that's where there's maybe a framework that's necessary, that actually people can almost have to manage themselves and go off and do stuff, you know, external stuff if that's possible, with universities to build their own their own CV, really, because it's too much for a small company to start training and developing everyone. They can support it or buy into a program. I mean, there are bodies, Institute of Travel and Tourism, that try and do this. There are various universities that TUI use. So the retail staff, where there's about 8,000 in the shops, all can go through qualifications ending up in a degree, and the company supports that. And that's something maybe that people in small companies should be plugging into.
Since you're on employability and growth, perhaps, and since we have several students here as well, what would be the 2 or 3 things that will make people employable in this economic climate? Just very briefly.
Just being bright, I think.
I was ready to say.
What you realise it is being bright. I think the biggest differentiator in the end does become, because of the nature of the industry we're in, but I think it's true generally actually, is the interpersonal skills, the ability to listen, the ability to look, and one of the sayings that myself and my team developed is fact-based decision making. As opposed to prejudice-based decision-making. Now, the problem is if you're prejudiced and you're the most senior guy, everyone tells you your facts are excellent. I think it's to listen, get the facts. There's nothing like being on the receiving end. When you get some young people join the organisation, they're looking at, say, how excursions are sold. And I remember a piece of research a long, long time ago that was done by Thomson's, where they did 2 pieces of research. This is all the excursions that were available to be sold in Mallorca to Thomson customers. So they asked the customers to rate the value for money, etc., etc., etc. So, that was the #1 tour. It's great, etc. They then interviewed the staff and asked them to do exactly the same questionnaire, and then I sit in a presentation like this where they then showed what the customers thought, and then they showed the staff. And actually the people who were the most out of touch and most unrealistic were the most senior staff at Thompson's. And then when you went to speak to them, they were then saying, you know, the youngsters are closer to the customers than anybody in the organisation.
And we have this problem currently with the social media in particular, because most of the young people understand social media and how they operate on Facebook, Twitter and all the rest of it. And we have a huge problem to explain that to the hierarchy and how critical that is, because they're going with the practices that they were 20, 30 years ago.
But in answer to that question, my son's trying currently, obviously, to get in for a 2012 university intake. And it must be the same for the universities, because you just say, yeah, you've all got A's. You've all got A stars at your GCSE. And suddenly almost the education, to a degree, is being put to one side. And then you think, well, how do you choose? And it must be on personal statements, the school statement about the individual. And of course, what then I assume the universities are attracted to is people, you know, do they question things? Do they think differently? Are they good to teach? Are they open? So it's all the same, all the same things.
We have the lady here in front.
Hi, my name is Elisa Infante. I volunteer for the to the Latin American Travel Association, and I'm a student, PhD student here in UK. And well, my question is that should the industry, the tourism, travel and hospitality industry, take a bit more of responsibility on training? Because you're right, actually, most of the top positions are covered by people who had, I mean, their education had nothing to do with travel. And to break into the, I mean, these positions, I mean, even if you have the education right now, I mean, there are many PhD students here, in the but if, I mean, the education is not enough to actually get into these positions. You need experience. So, I mean, there's a contrast there.
Adele, would you like to take this question?
So, should the industry take a bit more responsibility in this fact?
Adele? She doesn't want to.
Should the industry take more responsibility? Well, certainly universities have a responsibility. Should the industry take more responsibility? I mean, I think it does. I think it's all too easy to criticise industry. I think they do offer good training. They do offer positions, but of course, they are ultimately an organisation that has other criteria as well. I think the case of PhD students is slightly unique, and I do remember being one myself. I think if you asked many people in the industry, do you need a PhD to work in the industry? No, you don't. Does a PhD give you a way of thinking that opens you to possibilities further down the line? Yes, absolutely. That's an educator's perspective.
In Germany, I mean, John mentioned that earlier, in Germany you've got quite a lot of PhDs who are actually running companies, and Dermot probably has experienced that from the the German kind of environment, and that's a different kind of thing. Here it operates in a different way. The lady at the back with the pink.
Hi, my name is Carole Favre, and I lecture in travel and tourism.
Where?
And I lecture at HE and I lecture at FE level. And I have the feeling that I'm doing a job that actually means absolutely nothing, since employers in the travel and tourism industry employ students or children, teenagers with 4 C's at GCSEs. So you are, because of your decision to employ at such a low level of qualification, really setting standards for not employing the best people, and you're actually not making most of the use of education. You say universities have got a responsibility. Where is your responsibility to grow people within your organization, but also to actually respect and cherish the education that is given to these students for them to go and work in the industry, if actually you're not really interested in that, because what you want is cheap labor?
Dermot?
Did I feel you were looking at me all the time?
Yeah, she was.
I wouldn't mind saying something on that at some point.
Oh, okay. I thought you were picking on me because I was horrible to France for doing the package travel regulations. I mean, it is interesting because if you go through, well, I can only talk. I'm sorry if this feels like I don't even work for TUI anymore, but it does feel like talking about Thompson's. But it is one of the largest travel organisations, There's two problems. One is, and this was a thing that was at a session I was at 2 days ago, where people talk about the tourism industry or the travel industry, and then one gentleman got up and he said, well, you know, why aren't we lobbying government more? But when you get down to it, I mean, to have an industry that's got Hilton International, which is a world, you know, so we do break down into different sorts of business, big businesses, you know, the aviation industry alone doesn't really want to talk to the tour operator. You've got British Airways and Lufthansa got issues about aviation. We're in the aviation industry, obviously, with our own, with TUI's own airline. Then there's the accommodation. Then there's inbound. So when you talk to the government, so it does break down, very difficult. So when people talk about travel, it does break down into massive separate segments, and some of them, although they're all in the travel and hospitality industry, don't have too much to do with each other. But then when you come back, it's the bit where you're talking about with 4 Cs.
It's probably the travel agents.
Is travel agents, and actually that person's probably the most educated one in the retail. But the reason that is in many cases is not because the company's going for cheap labour, that the amount of effort that Thomsons do, and I'm sure Thomas Cook do the same, in training those staff to bring them up and provide procedures. And then, as I mentioned before, there was, I can't remember how many, I attended the House of Commons where about 40 were getting their degrees presented. So that was supported through a whole programme. And then the minister who came, you know, said all the usual claptrap that politicians do. I mean, very nice guy, but he basically said to me after, he said, you are fixing what we're not doing in the bloody secondary education system. I couldn't believe it. And he said, we're giving you £1 million or something, but he said, that's so cheap for you to go back and fix. So there is a problem. I mean, it is, I mean, if you go into a travel agent, and comes back to an HR point about involvement. Throughout the TUI organisation, they try wherever possible to have everybody participating if it's profitable via share schemes or both. So everyone can have what they call variable pay. So even though you get a low basic, if someone's really enthusiastic and they're in a great shop, and they sell a lot of a foreign exchange, they can develop their earnings. So we try and involve and engage, because you, in some cases you don't need a great education. But that's it. I'll shut up now.
John, would you like to?
Yeah, I'll give. I'll
microphone, John. Microphone. Microphone. Yeah.
I don't like microphones, actually. I'll give you another dimension as well. I was hired by Richard Branson in 1999 to set up Virgin.com in the UK. And at the time, I had to hire about 1,000 people, yeah? So for call centers, etc. And I was involved in this process myself. Out of the, I don't know, we got 5,000 applications. So Virgin at the time was a blue chip company. I think was voted the best to work with in UK, so to work for in UK. At the time, I don't know today. And just out of interest, I looked to many CVs and we made an analysis. We received about 5,000 CVs, something like that. I don't remember. So for 1,000 positions, yeah, only the 5% of them, they had a degree in tourism. The 95% they didn't. So it's not only the employer to get, so the educate, if you want, of the ones. So first of all, I don't think there are many people in the travel industry with a degree. And secondly, it's okay where to find them. So we were looking for good people. And we got good people, but you know, without what you mentioned, it's what demand is existing in the industry.
Gerard, you'd like to say something?
Just, I could probably just give a slightly different perspective on it. The first 7 years of my travel and tourism life was spent in Thomas Cook, and I started over the counter as a travel agent. And I think the fact that, you know, at Thomas Cook, the lady, sorry, I've forgotten your name. Is quite right. You know, people would be taken on at Thomas Cook to sell holidays, and they might have 3 GCSEs, grade C, or they might actually be graduates. And you know what? That's absolutely fantastic, because we opened it up, therefore, at Thomas Cook to absolutely everybody. So you didn't have to be particularly good at exams if you weren't particularly academically minded, but you had a great rapport with the customers, you had plenty of nous and common sense, you could still go far. So what you found is that some of the people that were taken on you're right, a relatively low salary, like myself, that didn't maybe have any qualifications. They were given the opportunity to rise through the ranks and go on there. And, you know, they were joined by some people that were actually graduates as well that joined. But it was a level playing field, and the ones that are naturally talented tended to go to the top, be they graduates or be they not graduates.
I'm not going to take another question. We can go around for a long time. I'm frustrated quite often by the level of non-understanding of people in the travel industry of the needs of the customer. But equally, that quite often is not related to the degree that someone has done. I've seen a lot of people with fantastic empathy and emotional intelligence that have no education, actually.
There are other levels of education. It's not only about degree and GCSEs, there are A levels as well. And none of you seem to recognize that.
Okay, we'll have this discussion later. There's a gentleman at the back there. Who you are, why you're here, what perfume?
Yeah, hello, my name is Martin. I work for a company called Acacia Africa, and I'm wearing Love.
Excellent.
In case you wanted to know. The last 3 or 4 questions, I have some comments to make about them and a question at the end of it. The first that came to mind was why young people, I'm from Australia, and people who would like to travel and don't have the money join a travel company or anything to do with travel, and they travel. So someone who's been overland through South America, 26 weeks, comes to London, they'll get a job in a travel agency because it saves that agency to train them. Someone wants to go to South America, here's the person you talk to. So it's a sale. So whether they've got a GCSE or whether they've got a degree in anything, anybody who wants to go in the travel business, they want to be there. I used to hire people. The first thing they would ask me is, what's the salary? I said, I'm sorry, you need to work here because you want to. And this is, I think, some people think, I've got a degree, I need the salary, but they don't have the experience. So if you've got some of the experience, you've got a job. If you travelled, I used to work in retail. Anybody who wanted to go away for 4 months, 5 months, I would guarantee them a job when they got back. And so that evolved over and over again. People would come to me, and because I had the people there who'd been there, done it, and I think with a lot of training, it's all very well seeing something on e-training or college. You need to have the experience. You need to go there to be there firsthand, and you can tell people you're halfway there for a sale. So my comments were, should we involve more fame trips or send people out to the countries that they're selling, get the experience. That way it's not so frustrating, because if you read a book, got it, tea time, whatever, you translate it how you want to, and there's always this lost in translation. But you go there, speak to the people, and I think my question would be, in any future training with the Bournemouth College has, do you also intend to send people out to the countries that you are training them to sell?
Yeah, I take that more as a statement, because I think everybody will agree with you that it's a matter of training. I'd like to ask Richard, because with the Olympic Games, what we experienced in Greece was the training that was given to the 45,000 volunteers during the Olympic Games period, and the year before and a little bit after, brought a whole range of new skills out and involved a lot of young people in that process. Do you see the Olympics and the legacy of the Olympics bringing some training and involving young people?
I think volunteering is a really interesting area in terms of how you develop a volunteer base which can be used for future events. And I mean, 24 hours per day from today we'll know whether or not we've been successful with the 2017 IIF athletics event. So if we already have an established body of 75,000 volunteers, then we already have that expertise. Also the welcome which they provide will be enhanced. But I think really in the Southwest we have a project called the Relays Project, which is the Regional Educational Legacy for Arts and Youth Sport, which runs various local community-based events which energise existing event volunteer networks. And I think a good case study to look at is the Manchester Commonwealth Games, 2000 Commonwealth Games, and 2 Commonwealth Games, which has a setup called the MEV, which is the Manchester Event Volunteers Programme, and it looks at how you can actually use these volunteers after the event and actually increase their capacity to volunteer in future events. I think the problem is the extent to which volunteers at these events are actually valued. The budget, it doesn't cost a lot of money to give a volunteer a t-shirt, but the value you get back from that, and I think the problem for 2012 is actually how those volunteers are valued and seen as what they are contributing. Because the first, I mean, I've been to 3 games now, and the volunteers will make and break their games because it will be the welcome which people receive when they arrive in the UK. It's crucial.
Thank you very much. Alan.
I was going to ask a question and make a statement, but I'll just make a statement now. No, it was just come back to the question asked earlier about, I'm sorry, it was the lady on the education side, and it's part, am I allowed to plug?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's Bournemouth, if it's Bournemouth University, yes.
Bournemouth. No, I think the issue was made about the education in the industry, and I think, you know, at Bournemouth we're working extremely hard, and I think a lot of universities and colleges have to look at themselves and work a lot harder in engaging with employers and recognising that the whole sector is moving very, very quickly. It's not dynamic packaging, but the whole scenario has moved beyond what it was 2 or 3 years ago. And we've had a couple of events. We've got another one in London on the 24th of November, so it's just in a fortnight's time. We call it BU Talent. And we've actually been quite surprised. But the reason we're using talent is the fact a lot of the larger companies now have got very, well, excellent, what they call talent management programs. And the question was asked about succession planning. And it's exactly what they're doing. So rather than just hiring and firing, they're developing people in a far more sort of strategic sense than perhaps they were previously. And I just echo some of the points that were made, that the 4 key conclusions that were drawn from the first event we held in June, and the mostly blue chip companies that have been coming along, you have to be bright, you've got to be hardworking, you have to have a passion for the sector. And I think it's too simplistic to say it's 3 CSEs or PhD. You've got to have bright people, you've got to have people that really have a passion in whatever aspect of tourism or hospitality that interests them. And the other area, and it's the issue that we have the biggest challenge for, is you have to be flexible. Our placements, we have about 600 placements a year. We're very proud of the fact that we have a 100% track record, but we work very, very hard at that. We have 2 full-time members of staff. That is their job, day in, day out, finding placements. 1 in 6 of those placements are overseas, and it's growing and growing and growing. And our challenge is to get white middle-class Britain to move out of Hampshire and Dorset. Okay, the industry is growing, but it's not growing in the areas that it's traditionally grown. And I think what we have to communicate to students, if they want a long-term career and have a very, very good career, they can, but they have to get out of their Gen Y comfort zone and the Xbox. 24th of November, City of London. If you look at the back, John Braxton, email him and you can come along. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'll continue on this kind of line. We launched 2 things in. We launched 2 things in the world travel market. The e-tourism lab, which is looking into tourism technology, social media, and everything that has with technology and tourism, and talk to us about that. The second thing is the conference that my colleague Vijay is doing. Which days? 13 and 14 of September 2012 on a climate change. Would you like to say a few words on this?
Climate change and sustainability.
Okay, sustainability and climate change. If you are interested in these things, please see Vijay on your way out. Again, we have got the Just a Drop charity that would like you to drop some coins, please. We take American Express, Visa card, whatever you have as well, but up to you. And also we've got several of our materials there, and we've got a few presents for you to take for those of people who didn't have a chance to ask a question. Please help me thanking our panel for their great presentation. I'll ask my colleagues to stay behind for a few minutes.